I am so excited. One of my favorite things to talk about is coming up, and I've spent like a week just like fleshing this out and trying to figure out how I want to talk about it. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited. And I like recorded a bunch of videos because unfortunately, well, I say that. Fortunately, I am very passionate about this, and so I get like super excited and I lose track of time. And so I wound up having to break it up into several different videos. And this is gonna be my attempt. My dog is eating a bone because she has resigned herself to mom just talking randomly out the window at a storm. And she's just like, fine, you won't cuddle me. So the sound is AON coping. Yeah, so anyway, so this is my video to kind of give you a little bit of context for the other videos that are coming up. I'm so excited. Okay, so there are two things that we need to talk about really quickly. It's me. One is going to be protagonists versus antagonists. So when you get into any kind of criticism or anything like that, or just like the science of stories, you're going to get into the concept of a protagonist versus an antagonist. A protagonist is your hero. It's the person that we're usually viewing the story through. They're the person that we want to see do really well. They're going to get the wish fulfillment kind of a thing. It is the single woman who no longer loves Christmas in the Hallmark movies, you know, and doesn't believe in love. And then by the end, she adores Christmas because the love of her life, soulmate, is the handsome prince who adores Christmas and can't live without it. That's a protagonist. Basically, the protagonist, if you think about it in like technical terms, the protagonist is the vehicle through which the reader is brought into the story and into the world and into the conflict. And without that protagonist to spark Thor's lightning, there is no lightning. Like there's nothing to draw the conflict and the spark and kickstart the alchemy of a story without this person, the protagonist. So they're super important. And the next videos are going to be talking about what kind of protagonists we can have. And I'm so excited. I can't even tell you. I can tell you and I will tell you, but that's in another video. So come back. The antagonist. So if you have the protagonist, you have the antagonist, who is the person who goes head to head with our protagonist. Typically, this is a person with whom they have history, or there's some sort of animosity between them. Sometimes it's not even animosity, it's just like, I'm sorry, I can't help you, and I'm just consistently the person, the speed bump, keeping you from moving forward. And it can be like your proper, like, we're gonna have a boss battle eventually and I will kill you. Kind of like a fantasy type. Or, well, if it's a murderer, you know, and this is the victim, like, you know, genre. But it's basically the person who's the main villain or the person who's coming against your protagonist. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is world building. Now, we talk about world building a lot in fantasy and how, like, we need to have rules, and do you have gravity? What kind of gravity do you have? What's the weather like? What are the main types of races and peoples and stuff like that? What are the rules of magic? What are the cultural rules that exist? How much does somebody know coming into this world about their culture and the rules, and who enforces the rules? And so all of these questions exist and have to be answered on some level by an author who's creating a world. Now, the thing is that this also applies to real world stories. So stories that don't take place in a fantasy sci-fi location, even if it's New York. Like, think about all the movies about New York. I've never been to New York, to be perfectly honest. I have a lot of friends who have been to New York, and they say it's a magical place, and I really want to go. Just haven't made it. But I know for a fact that New York is too complex to put into a novel well. So there are choices that an author has to make based on their genre, based on their story, based on their characters, that is going to make them build a facet of New York into the story. Now that can be taxi culture. Like, you get into a taxi and you have to deal with the drivers, you have to deal with the traffic, you have to deal with the person that you're sharing a cab with, or a conversation that you don't want somebody to overhear in your cab. You know, like, there's that part of New York. You could also have subway culture. You could have just pizza. Pizza features into a lot of New York stories. You have construction workers features into a lot of things. The traffic in general, the Eiffel, oh God, I'm sorry, the Empire State Building, Ellis Island. You have a lot of different pieces that if you put them in the right spot, it feels like New York. It feels like what we expect of New York. And it's going to drive the conflict or the story forward. Like, there's going to be a connection to the story that helps us, like, feel like the characters are in New York and that the story is happening because it's New York. Does that make sense? Why is this important? It's important because the way that you build the actual physical world is going to reflect the moral structure or the context of the world. Because basically any story, any book, no matter where it's set, is a snow globe. It's a snow globe that has edges that we're not going to go past in this story, because we're not writing a whole world. We're writing a specific story about specific people in a specific situation within the story. And if it's a series, you know, you might expand the world a little bit throughout the series. But in the beginning, like, you're just focusing on one part of the world that matters to that story and those people. So why is this important? The moral context of the story is what shapes the conflict of the story. So when you have think of Avatar. That world is based on a respect for nature and the spirit of nature, and it's inherent to their culture, and it also forms their religion, it forms how they interact with people, it forms their innocence, it forms their the way they handle conflict, and it also immediately identifies who the outsiders are and the value difference between humans versus I'm sorry, I can't remember their actual names, but the people of Avatar. So it's inherent to the story because it's built into the world. So, you know, by looking into this world, that it's different from Earth, it's different from humans, and humans are gonna have some issues because humans. So when you consider protagonists and antagonists, you have to really base it on the world, the context in which they're standing. Because the context in which they're standing is going to determine the type of conflict. Because the protagonist enters this world, and without the antagonist, again, there's no spark, there's no conflict, there's no story. But the conflict is always in some way connected to this context. So one of the things that I've been noticing lately, and I hadn't really picked this up before, but I watched I watched Sex in the City, I think like 3 episodes for the first time 2 weeks ago, and it's been sticking in my head, and I've been thinking about like all of the movies that I've seen and the shows that are based in New York. And a lot of them, like you think of Friends, you think of How I Met Your Mother, you think of Sex in the City, how to change a guy in 10 days, or I don't think that's right. But but all of these rom-coms or these comedies where, and even a lot of the dramas where you have these single successful or aspirational people moving to the city because they want to explore their dreams, they want to pursue their dreams, and they're at some level, there's some spectrum of success there. And once they have that kind of success, or once they're like engaging New York as the dream machine or the success machine that it is, you suddenly have this desire to meet the right one, to fall in love, get married, have kids, and almost all of them are like, at that point, we'll just move out of the city. And it's a consistent trope within New York, which I find really interesting. So when you have a story set in New York, a lot of times you know that it's like a hustling kind of city. And so they have a lot of like scenes that focus on that. And then, and as we get into the meat of the story, we have like, okay, we're here to make money. It's the 24-hour city. Like everybody's always awake. There's an energy to nighttime that, I'm sorry, kids are not compatible with, typically. No judgments whatsoever. I'm just basing this on stories and like what we can get from stories and the world building, and the moral structure of the world building. We got it. So when you have like the nightlife, and you've got the hustling and the bustling and the lack of like suburban rhythms, I guess, you know that that's going to create a context that's automatically going to start rubbing on your characters. Like either it's going to be something that they really vibe with, and they're like, yes, and I'm going to be successful, and it's more of a success sort of story, or it's going to start going, but I want something different. I want something more than just the hustle and the glitter and the glam. I want sleep and regular routines, and I don't know, a dog and a house, picket fence, blah, blah, blah. But the way that the author makes choices about what they want to show, what they want to talk about in their world, to show which side of New York is going to influence the story, which side is going to kind of slap our person around, our protagonist around, or is going to nurture that protagonist. All of these things are part of world building, and they're all really essential, because that is the conduit of story. It's what gives it again, it's the snow globe. It's the context and the world within which the protagonist is going to have its journey, and they're going to go through their arc, and they can't step outside of that snow globe and that context, because that's the world at large, right? So that's our context. Please come back, because I am so excited about my next several videos, and just the absolute mind-blowing possibility of characters, and what they are, and what they can bring about, and how that relates to readers and viewers. And I'm so excited. So come back, and I'll see you later.